Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the metal floor of Nexus Prime Station. The massive space station stretched as far as his eyes could see in every direction. Hundreds of different alien species walked, crawled, and floated through the wide corridors. Some were tall and thin like walking sticks. Others were short and round like living boulders. A few had wings, many had extra arms, and some glowed with their own light. Jake pulled his single bag over his shoulder and followed the signs pointing toward the Galactic Military Academy. He was nervous. At 19 years old, he was the only human in his class of new cadets. Earth had only recently joined the Galactic Federation, and Jake was one of the first humans ever accepted into their military training program. The other cadets barely noticed him as he walked through the registration area. Most were too busy staring at species they had never seen before. Jake found this funny since he probably looked just as strange to them. Humans were new to the galaxy after all. A tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms checked Jake's papers. "Morrison Jake, human. Dorm room 847B, your roommate is already there." The alien handed Jake a small device. "This translator will help you understand everyone. Press the button if it stops working." Jake thanked the alien and made his way to the dormitory section. The hallways were built to accommodate all sizes of beings, so the ceilings were very high. Jake felt small walking beneath them. He found room 847B and pressed his hand against the door scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, a large insect-like creature was organizing belongings in what looked like a complex web structure attached to the ceiling. The being had 6 legs, 4 arms, and a head that could turn completely around. Its skin was dark green with silver stripes. "You must be my roommate," the creature said, climbing down from the ceiling. "I am Chirex from the Hive Worlds. What are you?" "I'm Jake, a human from Earth," Jake replied, setting his bag on the empty bed. Chirex tilted his head, which made a clicking sound. "Human. Yes, I have heard of your species. Very new to space travel. Your planet has very weak gravity, correct?" Jake nodded. "Earth's gravity is 0.98 standard units." Chirex made what sounded like laughter. "My homeworld has 2.4 standard units. I will need to be careful not to accidentally hurt you during training. You must be very fragile." Before Jake could respond, an announcement echoed through the dorm. "All new cadets report to Orientation Hall in 10 minutes. Attendance is mandatory." Jake and Chirex made their way to the massive hall along with hundreds of other new cadets. Jake noticed he was definitely the smallest being there. Even the shortest aliens were taller than him. Some cadets pointed at him and whispered to their friends. He caught words like tiny and weak through his translator. The hall filled quickly. Jake found a seat near the back and looked around at his classmates. There were crystal beings that sparkled in the light, furry creatures with long tails, and reptile-like aliens with scales that changed color. One group of cadets looked like they were made of living stone, while another group seemed to be made of some kind of metal. A massive alien walked onto the stage at the front of the hall. He stood at least 7 feet tall and was covered in what looked like natural armor. His face was angular and his eyes glowed red. When he spoke, his voice boomed across the room. "I am Commander Xylak. Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. You are here because your worlds have chosen you to represent them in our United Defense Force. Over the next 4 years, you will be trained in combat, strategy, technology, and leadership." The commander pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared above the stage. It showed different planets and their basic information. Each of you comes from a different world with different conditions. This diversity is our strength. However, you must learn to work together despite your differences. The display began showing gravity ratings for different homeworlds. Jake watched as numbers appeared next to planet names. Grimlock Prime, 3.2 standard units. Solarite, 2.8 standard units. Centauri, 2.1 standard units. Then Earth appeared, 0.98 standard units. Loud laughter erupted from several sections of the hall. Jake felt his face turn red as hundreds of alien eyes turned to look at him. "0.98? Shouted a crystal being from the middle of the hall. "How does anything survive on such a weak world?" A massive stone-like creature stood up. "No wonder humans look so small and fragile. They probably float around like dust particles on their planet." More laughter filled the hall. Jake sank lower in his seat as the comments continued. Do they even have muscles? Asked a scaly reptile alien. Their bones must be hollow, like bird bones, added another. Maybe that's why they're so pale. No need for strong skin when there's no real gravity to fight against, laughed a furry creature with 6 arms. Commander Xylac raised his hand for silence, but Jake could still hear whispers and chuckles throughout the hall. The commander continued his presentation, covering academy rules, training schedules, and graduation requirements. Jake tried to pay attention, but he kept hearing snickers whenever the commander mentioned physical training requirements. After orientation, cadets gathered in small groups to introduce themselves. Jake approached a group of mixed species, hoping to make some friends. The conversation stopped when he walked up. Oh, it's the human, said Vex, the crystal being who had laughed earlier. We were just talking about tomorrow's physical fitness test. Are you worried you might break something? A tall warrior-like alien named Thorak looked down at Jake. I heard humans can only lift objects equal to their own body weight. Is that true? On my world, younglings can lift 5 times their weight. My species can run for days without stopping, said Nira, a reptilian cadet with green scales. But I suppose on a low-gravity world like yours, running is more like gentle floating. Jake tried to smile. Humans are stronger than we look. This caused another round of laughter. Kex, an 8-foot-tall alien with thick arms, patted Jake on the head like he was a pet. I'm sure you are, little human. We'll try to go easy on you during training. Don't worry, added Chirex, who had joined the group. I'll help you carry your equipment if it gets too heavy. Jake felt frustrated but kept his voice calm. Thanks, but I think I'll be okay. As the group broke up to return to their dorms, Jake heard more comments behind him. Poor thing probably needs help climbing stairs. I wonder if he'll float away if he jumps too hard. Earth must be the vacation planet of the galaxy. No real challenges there. Back in his room, Jake unpacked his few belongings while Chirex continued to organize his complex web sleeping structure. His roommate seemed nice enough, but even his kindness felt like pity. Jake, Chirex said from his position hanging upside down from the ceiling. I do not mean to insult you, but I am curious. What kind of physical training do humans do on Earth? Jake looked up from his unpacking. All kinds. Running, climbing, swimming, fighting, carrying heavy loads over long distances. Chirex made his clicking laugh sound again. That sounds pleasant. Like recreational activities. On my world, young ones must climb cliff faces in storms while carrying twice their body weight. It builds character. Sounds tough, Jake said simply. Perhaps sometime you could show me some human exercises, Chirex offered. I would be interested to see what passes for training on a low-gravity world. Jake smiled for the first time since arriving at the academy. I'd be happy to show you some human training methods. Maybe we could invite some other cadets too. That would be entertaining, Chirex agreed. I'm sure they would enjoy seeing human exercises. It might be quite amusing. Jake continued unpacking, but his mind was already working. Tomorrow would bring their first official training session, and he had a feeling his classmates were in for some surprises. They thought Earth's low gravity made humans weak, but they didn't understand what it really meant. Humans had evolved on a world where they had to work against gravity every single day of their lives. Every step, every movement, every action was training. As Jake settled into his bed for the night, he could hear alien cadets in other rooms still laughing and making jokes about the fragile human. He closed his eyes and smiled. They would learn, soon enough, that being light didn't mean being weak. In fact, it might mean being something much more dangerous than they could imagine. Jake woke up before dawn to the sound of his alarm. He looked over at Chirex, who was still hanging from his web structure with all 6 legs tucked under him. The insectoid was making soft buzzing sounds that Jake assumed was snoring. Jake got dressed quietly and made his way to the academy's gym. He had always been an early riser, and exercise helped him think clearly. The gym was empty except for a few cleaning robots that glided silently across the floor. He started with basic stretches, then moved to push-ups, sit-ups, and jumping jacks. After 30 minutes, he was warming up nicely. Jake had been exercising like this since he was 12 years old. His father had been a Marine, and Jake had grown up believing that physical fitness was the foundation of everything else. "What are you doing?" Jake turned to see Vex, the crystal being from yesterday. His body sparkled in the dim gym lights as he walked closer. "Just working out," Jake said, continuing his routine. Vex watched Jake do another set of push-ups. "This is your exercise? Lowering your body to the ground and pushing back up?" "It's one exercise, yes." "How much weight are you lifting?" Jake paused. "My own body weight." Vex made a sound like breaking glass, which Jake's translator identified as laughter. "You lift only your own weight? Watch this." Vex moved to a weight machine designed for heavy gravity species. He loaded it with weights that totaled nearly 3 times Jake's entire body weight. Then he lifted it easily, his crystal structure barely showing strain. "This is real exercise," Vex said proudly. "Raw power, pure strength." Jake nodded politely. "Very impressive." More cadets began arriving for the mandatory morning physical training. Thorak, the massive stone-like warrior, entered first. He looked at Jake with something like pity. "Human, why are you here so early? Training does not start for another hour." "I like to warm up first," Jake explained. Thorak laughed, a sound like boulders rolling down a hill. "Warm up for what? The instructor will probably have you sit and watch while the rest of us do real training." Instructor Corvin arrived exactly on time. He was a member of a species Jake hadn't seen before, with silver skin and 4 legs. He moved with the fluid grace of a natural athlete. "Line up," Corvin barked. "Today we test your basic fitness levels. First exercise is distance running. 5 miles at standard academy pace." The cadets lined up at the starting line. Jake found himself next to Nira, the green-scaled reptilian who had mocked him yesterday. "Try to keep up, human," she said with a forked tongue flicking out. "I can run for 3 days without stopping on my homeworld." "I'll do my best," Jake replied. Instructor Corvin blew a whistle and the group started running. Jake settled into a comfortable pace, his breathing steady and controlled. This was familiar territory for him. He had run cross-country and high school and still ran 5 miles every morning. Within the first mile, Jake noticed something interesting. Many of the alien cadets who had bragged about their strength were already breathing heavily. Thorak's massive frame was built for power, not endurance. Each of his steps shook the ground, but he was using enormous amounts of energy with every stride. Vex was having different problems. His crystal structure was incredibly strong, but it was also heavy. On his homeworld's high gravity, this wasn't an issue because he had developed powerful leg muscles. But sustained running was not something his species typically did. By the second mile, Jake was running comfortably in the middle of the pack. Several aliens who had seemed so confident were now falling behind. Chirex was doing well with his 6 legs, giving him a smooth gait, but even he was working harder than Jake. Nira, who had boasted about running for days, was indeed keeping a good pace. But Jake noticed her running style was different. She moved in bursts of speed followed by brief coasting periods. It was efficient for hunting, but not ideal for steady distance running. By the 3rd mile, Jake moved into the front group. He wasn't trying to race anyone. He was just running at his normal, comfortable pace. But his normal pace was apparently faster than many of the superior alien cadets could maintain. Instructor Corvin ran alongside the group, making notes on a digital tablet. Jake caught the instructor looking at him several times with what seemed like surprise. The 4th mile saw more cadets dropping back. Thorak had slowed to a walk, his massive chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. Vex was still running, but his crystal structure had lost its bright sparkle and was now dull gray with exhaustion. Jake finished the 5-mile run in the top 5 cadets out of over 200. He wasn't even breathing particularly hard. As he walked around to cool down, he heard conversations around him. How did the human keep up? He must be cheating somehow. Maybe the distance measurements are wrong. Kex, the 8-foot warrior who had patted Jake's head yesterday, jogged over. He was breathing hard and covered in sweat. "Human," Kex panted. "How are you not tired?" Jake shrugged. "I run 5 miles every morning. Have since I was in high school." "Every morning." Kex looked confused. Why? To stay in shape. This seemed to puzzle Kex even more. On his world, physical training was done in short, intense bursts to build maximum strength. The idea of daily, moderate exercise was foreign to him. The next test was an obstacle course. Jake watched as other cadets attacked it with raw power, jumping high, smashing through barriers, and lifting heavy objects. Many completed it faster than Jake did. But Jake noticed something they didn't. He finished the course without being exhausted, while most of them needed several minutes to recover. During combat training, Instructor Morph, a shape-shifting alien, paired cadets for basic sparring. Jake was matched with a medium-sized cadet named Zix, who had gray skin and looked like he was made of rubber. "Be gentle with the human," several cadets called out. "Don't break him." Zix nodded seriously. "I will hold back most of my strength." The sparring match began, and Zix immediately tried to grab Jake in what was probably a standard wrestling move on his homeworld, but Jake wasn't there. Human reflexes, developed through millions of years of hunting and being hunted, allowed Jake to slip away from the grab and counter with a quick strike to Zix's midsection. Zix looked surprised, but came at Jake again, this time moving faster. Jake ducked under the attack and swept Zix's legs, sending the alien tumbling to the mat. "Lucky shot," Thorak called out from the watching group, but it wasn't luck, and Jake proved it over the next few minutes. His smaller size and quick reflexes allowed him to avoid Zix's stronger but slower attacks. When the match ended, Jake had clearly won, though he had tried not to embarrass his opponent. Instructor Morph walked over. "Interesting technique, Cadet Morrison. Your species seems to favor speed and precision over raw power." "Yes, sir," Jake replied. After training, Jake was walking back to the dorms when he overheard a group of cadets talking. "The human got lucky today," Vex was saying. "His opponents went easy on him." "And the running test must have been calibrated wrong," added Nira. "There's no way someone from such a weak world could outrun us." Thorak nodded his massive head. "My instructors always said that beings from low-gravity worlds have weak bones and soft muscles. Today was probably just a fluke." Chirex, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "Maybe we should give him more credit. He did perform better than expected." "Expected?" Kex laughed. "We expected nothing from him. Any performance looks good compared to nothing." Jake kept walking, but he was thinking. These aliens had such strong opinions about human weakness, but they based those opinions on limited information. They knew Earth had lower gravity, so they assumed humans were weak. They didn't consider that living in constant gravity might build different kinds of strength. That evening, Jake was studying in his room when Chirex climbed down from his web. "Jake, I have been thinking about today's training." "What about it?" "You performed better than I expected. Better than any of us expected." Jake looked up from his books. "Maybe your expectations were wrong." Chirex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Perhaps. But I have been reading about human physiology." He activated a holographic display showing human anatomy. "Your muscle fibers are different from ours, more focused on endurance than explosive power." "That's true. And your cardiovascular system is quite advanced for such a small creature." Jake closed his book. "Chirex, would you and some of the other cadets be interested in trying some real human training?" Chirex tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I mean training the way humans train on Earth. Not just lifting heavy weights or short sprints. Real human conditioning. Would it be challenging?" Jake smiled. "I think you might be surprised." Chirex seemed excited by the idea. "Yes, I think several cadets would be interested, especially after today's performance. They might want to understand how you did so well. Or they might want to prove that today was just luck." "That too," Chirex agreed. "What kind of training did you have in mind?" Jake thought for a moment. The other cadets thought humans were weak because they came from a low-gravity world. They didn't understand that humans had evolved as endurance hunters, capable of tracking prey for hours or even days until it collapsed from exhaustion. They saw Jake's smaller size and assumed weakness. not understanding that human training focused on efficiency and persistence rather than raw power. "Just a simple hike," Jake said finally. "Nothing too strenuous." The next morning, Jake sat in the academy cafeteria eating breakfast. The food was designed to meet the nutritional needs of dozens of different species, so it was bland but filling. He watched the other cadets at their tables, noting how they separated into groups based on their home worlds. Chirek slid into the seat across from him, balancing a tray of what looked like liquid nutrients. "I spoke with several cadets last night," Chirek said, his mandibles clicking softly. "They are very interested in your offer of human training." "Which cadets?" Jake asked. Vex was the first to volunteer. He said he wanted to see what passes for exercise on a weak gravity world. Thorak also wants to join. He thinks it will be amusing. Jake nodded, chewing his food slowly. "Anyone else?" "Kex, Nira, and about 8 others. They're calling it the Human Challenge and making bets about how easy it will be." Jake almost choked on his breakfast. "Bets?" "Oh yes," Chirex continued, unaware of Jake's reaction. "Vex bet that he could complete whatever you design while carrying extra weight. Thorax said he could do it backwards. Kex thinks he can finish in half the time you set." Jake set down his fork. This was getting out of hand, but maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. "When do they want to do this training?" Jake asked. "This weekend. Saturday morning. They want to get it over with quickly so they can return to real training." Jake stood up, his mind already working on the details. "Tell them Saturday works for me. I'll need to reserve one of the environmental simulation chambers." "What kind of environment will you need?" Chirex asked. "Earth standard. Gravity, atmosphere, terrain. Nothing too extreme." After breakfast, Jake made his way to the Academy's Simulation Control Center. The technician on duty was a small, furry creature with large eyes and delicate hands. "I need to reserve Chamber 7 for Saturday morning," Jake said. The technician checked his schedule. "Chamber 7 is available. What environment do you need?" "Earth standard conditions. I want to simulate a mountain hiking trail." The technician's large eyes blinked slowly. "Mountain hiking? That sounds recreational. Are you sure you don't want something more challenging for military training?" Jake smiled. "Trust me, this will be challenging enough." "Very well. Earth gravity is 0.98 standard units. Atmosphere is primarily nitrogen and oxygen. What specific terrain?" Jake thought about the hiking trails he knew from Earth. He needed something that would be tough but fair, something that would test endurance without being dangerous. "I want to simulate the Rocky Mountain Trail system, specifically a 12-mile loop trail with an elevation gain of about 3,000 feet. Rocky terrain, some steep sections, but nothing requiring climbing equipment." The technician entered the specifications into his computer. 12 miles? That seems quite long for a training exercise." "It's a moderate hike by Earth standards," Jake explained. "If you say so. The simulation will be ready Saturday morning, at 800 hours. Word of the challenge spread through the academy faster than Jake had expected. By Friday evening, it seemed like half the cadet corps knew about the human training exercise planned for Saturday. Jake overheard conversations about it everywhere he went. "I heard the human is going to make them carry rocks while walking," one cadet whispered. "My friend said it involves jumping over obstacles for hours," said another. "It's probably just stretching and light calisthenics," laughed a third. What else could someone from a weak world come up with? Jake tried to ignore the talk, but it was everywhere. Some cadets seemed excited to watch the spectacle. Others were taking bets on how quickly the volunteers would finish. A few seemed worried that Jake might embarrass himself in front of so many witnesses. Lisa Park, the human engineering cadet, found Jake in the library Friday night. "I heard about your challenge," she said, sitting down across from him. "Are you sure about this?" "What do you mean?" Jake asked, looking up from his study materials. "There are going to be a lot of spectators tomorrow. If this goes badly, it could make things worse for humans at the academy." Jake considered this. Lisa was right. If the alien cadets easily completed his challenge, It would confirm their belief that humans were weak. But if they struggled, I think it will be fine, Jake said. What exactly are you planning? Just a hike, 12 miles through mountain terrain. Lisa's eyes widened. 12 miles. Jake, these aliens have never done endurance hiking. Their training is all about short bursts of maximum effort. I know. And they'll be doing it in Earth gravity and atmosphere, which they're not used to. I know. Lisa studied his face. You're not just trying to show them up, are you? You're trying to teach them something. Jake closed his book. Maybe both. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. Jake got up early and did his usual warm-up routine. When he arrived at Simulation Chamber 7, he found a crowd waiting. Not just the 12 volunteers, but at least 50 spectators. Some instructors were there too, including Commander Xylac. Quite a turnout, Cadet Morrison, the commander said. I hope you've prepared something educational. I hope so too, sir, Jake replied. The 12 volunteers were gathered near the chamber entrance, talking loudly and joking with each other. Vex had brought extra weights to carry as he had promised. Thorak was doing stretches that looked more like showing off. Kex was flexing his massive arms for the spectators. Human, Vex called out, his crystal structure sparkling with confidence. We are ready for your little exercise. Try not to make it too easy. Jake walked over to the group. Before we start, I want to explain what we're doing. This is a 12-mile hike through mountain terrain. The trail goes up and down hills, over rocks, and through different types of ground. We'll be walking at a steady pace for several hours. Several hours? Thorak looked confused. Why would training take several hours? Because that's how long it takes to complete 12 miles of mountain hiking. Nira flicked her forked tongue. On my world, we complete all our training in 1 hour or less. Maximum intensity, maximum results. This is different, Jake said. This is endurance training. It's about maintaining effort over a long period of time. Several of the volunteers exchanged glances. Keck spoke up. Human, are you sure this is training? It sounds more like a slow walk. You'll see, Jake said simply. The simulation chamber doors opened, and everyone filed inside. The chamber was enormous, easily the size of several football fields. As soon as the doors closed, the environment began to change. The air became thinner and cooler. The gravity shifted to Earth standard. Rocky mountain terrain materialized. Around them, complete with trees, streams, and distant peaks. Several of the alien cadets immediately noticed the change in gravity. For most of them, Earth's lighter gravity should have made everything easier, but combined with the thinner air and different atmospheric pressure, it created an unfamiliar sensation. This feels strange, Chirek said, taking a few experimental steps. You'll get used to it, Jake said. He pointed to a trail marker that had appeared nearby. We follow the yellow markers. They'll lead us through the complete loop. Jake started walking at what he considered a normal hiking pace. Not fast, not slow, just steady and sustainable. The alien cadets fell in behind him, still talking and joking. For the first mile, everything seemed easy. The volunteers were chatting, pointing out interesting features of the simulated landscape, and generally treating it like a casual stroll. Some spectators followed along for the first part of the trail before turning back. This is your training? Vex called out from behind Jake. I could do this while sleeping. The day is young, Jake replied without turning around. By the second mile, the trail began to climb more steeply. Jake maintained his steady pace, his breathing controlled and even. Behind him, the conversations were getting quieter as the volunteers needed more air for walking. Thorak, despite his massive strength, was starting to breathe harder. His body was built for lifting enormous weights and short bursts of intense activity. Sustained cardio work in unfamiliar atmospheric conditions was something entirely different. Human, Thorak called out. Can we rest for a moment? Jake stopped and turned around. Of course, take all the time you need. The group stopped for 5 minutes while several cadets caught their breath. Jake noticed that none of them seemed to understand the concept of pacing themselves. They were either walking too fast and getting tired, or walking too slow, and then rushing to catch up. How much further? asked Nira, her scales changing to a darker color that Jake's research had told him indicated stress. Jake checked the trail markers. About 10 miles to go. 10 miles? Kex looked shocked. We've only gone 2 miles? Walking uphill takes time, Jake explained. When they resumed hiking, Jake noticed the group was much quieter. The joking and bragging had stopped. Several cadets were focusing entirely on putting one foot in front of the other. By the 4th mile, the complaints began. This is taking forever, Vex muttered, his crystal structure no longer sparkling brightly. My feet hurt, added another cadet Jake didn't know well. Why are we walking so slowly? Asked Kex. Can't we just run to the end? Jake stopped the group again. Anyone who wants to run ahead is welcome to try. But remember, you still have 8 miles to go after this point. 2 of the younger cadets decided to take Jake's challenge. They jogged, ahead at a fast pace, disappearing around a bend in the trail. By mile 8, the alien cadets were no longer the confident group that had started the hike. Vex, who had sparkled with pride at the beginning, now looked dull and gray. His crystal structure seemed heavier with each step, and he was breathing through his mouth in short, sharp gasps. Jake maintained his steady pace, checking behind him regularly to make sure no one was falling too far back. He could see the strain on their faces, but he also saw something else: determination. These cadets were fighters, and they weren't going to quit easily. Jake, Chirex called out, his voice strained. How much further? Jake checked the trail markers. 4 miles to go. A collective groan went up from the group. Thorak, the massive stone warrior who had seemed so powerful in the gym, was now leaning against a tree for support. 4 more miles. Thorak's voice cracked slightly. I don't understand. On my world, the hardest training lasts 1 hour. We do maximum effort, then we rest. This just keeps going. Jake stopped and turned to face the group. They all looked exhausted, but he could see they were trying hard not to show weakness in front of each other. Would you like to know why human training is different? Jake asked. Several heads nodded, though some of the cadets seemed too tired to speak. On Earth, early humans weren't the biggest or strongest predators. We couldn't run as fast as a cheetah or fight as well as a lion, but we had one advantage. We could keep going when other animals had to stop. Jake pointed to a rock formation that looked like it could provide some shade. Let's rest for a few minutes while I explain. The group practically collapsed onto the rocks and grass. Jake remained standing, barely breathing hard despite having walked 8 miles through mountain terrain. Imagine you're hunting an antelope, Jake continued. The antelope is much faster than you. It can run away easily, but antelopes can only run fast for short distances, so you don't try to catch it immediately. Instead, you follow it at a steady pace. Nira, whose green scales had turned a pale yellow from exhaustion, looked up at Jake. Follow it how? You track its footprints, you watch where it goes. When it runs away, you keep walking in the same direction. Eventually, you find it again, and it runs away again. You keep following. Kex wiped sweat from his forehead. For how long? Hours. Sometimes all day. The antelope gets more and more tired each time it has to run, but you're not running. You're just walking steadily. Your heart rate stays low. Your breathing stays controlled. You can do this for a very long time. Vex made a weak sound that might have been laughter. The antelope, it dies from exhaustion? Eventually, yes. It runs itself to death trying to escape something that won't stop following it. The alien cadet stared at Jake with a mixture of horror and fascination. That's terrifying, Chirex said quietly. That's evolution, Jake replied. Humans became the most successful hunters on Earth not because we were strong, but because we were relentless. After their rest, the group resumed hiking. But now the atmosphere was completely different. The aliens were no longer making jokes or boasting about their abilities. They were focused on simply finishing what they had started. Jake noticed their walking techniques were improving. Instead of rushing and then slowing down, they were learning to maintain a steady pace. Instead of fighting the terrain, they were starting to work with it. Jake, Thorak said during mile 9, On your world, do all humans train like this? Most humans can walk for several hours without much trouble, Jake answered. We learn it as children. Every human culture has some form of endurance activity. What about running? Asked Nira. Humans are excellent long-distance runners. We're not the fastest, but we can run for hours. Some humans run races that are over 26 miles long. 26 miles? Keck stopped walking entirely. That's impossible. It's called a marathon. Thousands of humans do it every year. Some people run even longer distances. The group was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. During mile 10, they encountered a steep section of trail that switchbacked up the side of a mountain. Jake started up the incline at his usual steady pace. Behind him, he could hear the aliens struggling. This is impossible, gasped one of the cadets Jake didn't know well. My legs feel like they're on fire. Mine too, agreed another. How does the human make it look so easy? Jake slowed down and moved to the back of the group. It's not easy, he said. I'm working just as hard as you are, but my body is used to this kind of work. Used to it how? Vex asked, his crystal structure now completely dull. Every day since I was 12 years old, I've done some form of cardio exercise. Running, hiking, swimming, cycling. My heart and lungs are trained for sustained effort. Chirex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. We train for strength and power. Maximum effort for short periods. Different worlds, different evolution, different training, Jake said. Your way isn't wrong, it's just different. But your way... Thorak paused, breathing heavily. Your way seems more practical for some situations. Like chasing down enemies who think they can escape by running away, added Nira with growing understanding. As they climbed the steep section, Jake shared more stories about human endurance. He told them about ancient Greek soldiers who could march 20 miles a day in full armor. He described Native American hunters who could track animals across entire continents. He explained how human messengers once carried important news across vast distances on foot. Before we had machines, Jake said, humans were the long-distance transportation system for most of the world. By mile 11, the alien cadets were moving very slowly, but they were still moving. Jake was impressed by their determination. Many of them were clearly in pain, but none had asked to quit. 1 more mile, Jake announced. Instead of groans, he heard sounds of relief and determination. We can do 1 more mile, Thorak said, though his voice was weak. Just 1 more, agreed Vex. The final mile was mostly downhill, which should have been easier. But Jake knew that walking downhill for long distances could be just as tiring as going uphill, just in different ways. Your leg muscles had to work constantly to control your descent and prevent you from falling. Several of the cadets discovered this the hard way, stumbling as their tired legs struggled to maintain balance on the rocky trail. Why is downhill so hard? Chirex asked, moving carefully from rock to rock. Your muscles are tired from the uphill sections, Jake explained. Now they have to work in a different way to keep you from falling. It's like doing a completely different exercise when you're already exhausted. As they approached the end of the trail, Jake could see the finish point ahead. The simulation chamber exit was visible through the trees, along with a crowd of spectators who had been waiting to see how the challenge would end. There it is, Jake said, pointing ahead. The alien cadets looked up and saw the exit. For a moment, Jake thought they might try to run the last few hundred yards, but they were too tired. They just kept walking at their slow, steady pace. Jake, Vex said quietly as they neared the end, I owe you an apology. Why? I thought humans were weak because you come from a low-gravity world. I thought this would be easy. And now? Vex was quiet for a moment. Now I think humans might be the scariest species in the galaxy. Why? Because you never stop, Jake smiled. We prefer to think of it as persistent. As they walked the final steps to the finish line, Jake could see Commander Xylak and several other instructors waiting. Behind them were dozens of cadet spectators, many of whom looked surprised to see the alien volunteers looking so exhausted. One by one, the 12 cadets crossed the finish line. Some needed help walking the last few steps. Others collapsed onto benches that had been set up for recovery. All of them looked like they had been through the most challenging experience of their lives. Jake crossed the finish line last, looking like he had just finished a pleasant afternoon walk. The crowd was completely silent. The silence in the simulation chamber was broken only by the heavy breathing of the 12 alien cadets, who had just finished Jake's light hike. Vex lay flat on his back, his crystal structure completely gray and dull. Thorax sat on a bench, with his massive head in his hands. Chirex had all 6 legs spread out as he tried to catch his breath. Jake stood near the finish line, barely showing any signs of exhaustion. His breathing was normal, his posture was straight, and he looked like he could easily do the whole hike again. Commander Xylac walked over to Jake, his red eyes studying the human cadet carefully. "Cadet Morrison," the commander said. "That was quite an educational demonstration." "Thank you, sir," Jake replied. The commander looked at the exhausted alien cadets, then back at Jake. 12 miles in 4 hours and 37 minutes. Most of your classmates appear to need medical attention. Jake glanced at his fellow cadets with genuine concern. "Are they going to be okay?" "They'll recover," said Dr. Helix, the Academy's medical officer who had been watching from the spectator area. "They're experiencing extreme fatigue but no serious injuries. However, I recommend they rest for the remainder of the day." The spectators who had gathered to watch the finish were whispering among themselves. Jake could hear fragments of their conversations through his translator. How is the human not tired? Did you see how the others could barely finish? Maybe we don't understand humans as well as we thought. Vex slowly sat up, his crystal structure beginning to show faint sparkles again as he recovered. He looked at Jake with something that might have been respect mixed with fear. "Human," Vex said weakly. "How are you not exhausted?" Jake walked over and offered Vex a water bottle from the supply station. "I am tired, but this is the kind of tired I'm used to. My body recovers from this type of exercise quickly. But we are stronger than you," Thorax said, lifting his massive head. "I can lift weights that would crush you. How did strength not help us?" Jake sat down on a nearby rock so he wouldn't be looking down at the exhausted cadets. "Strength and endurance are different things. You're absolutely right that you're stronger than me. But strength doesn't always help with endurance activities." Nira, whose scales were slowly returning to their normal green color, spoke up. "Explain." "Think about a powerful race car," Jake said. "It can go very fast for short distances, but it uses a lot of fuel and needs to stop often. Now think about a regular car built for long trips. It's not as fast, but it can drive for hours without stopping." Chirex clicked his mandibles in understanding. "We are the race cars." "And I'm the regular car," Jake agreed. "Different tools for different jobs." Kex, who was leaning against a tree, shook his head slowly. "But on my world, endurance means being able to fight for 30 minutes without stopping. Not this." 30 minutes is a long fight," Jake said. "But what if the fight lasted 3 hours or 6 hours or all day?" The alien cadets looked at each other with dawning realization. "You're saying humans can fight for hours?" asked one of the cadets. Jake didn't know well. "If we had to, yes. Maybe not at maximum intensity, but we could keep going." Dr. Helix approached, the group carrying a medical scanner. "I've been monitoring your vital signs during the exercise," he said to Jake. "Your heart rate never went above 140 beats per minute. Your oxygen saturation remained steady. Your muscle tension indicators showed moderate but sustainable stress levels." "What does that mean?" Thorak asked. "It means," Dr. Helix continued, "that Cadet Morrison could have maintained this pace for significantly longer than 12 miles. "How? Much longer?" Vex asked quietly. Jake shrugged. "I've done 20-mile hikes before. Some humans do 50 or even 100-mile hikes." 100 miles? Chirex's voice cracked. "That's impossible." "It takes several days," Jake explained. "You hike for 10 or 12 hours, sleep, then hike again the next day." The alien cadet stared at Jake like he had just claimed he could fly. Commander Xylac, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped forward. Cadet Morrison, you mentioned that humans evolved as persistence hunters. Can you elaborate? Jake nodded. Early humans lived in Africa, where there were lots of fast, strong animals. Humans couldn't outrun a gazelle or overpower a buffalo, but humans could sweat to cool down, which most animals can't do efficiently. Humans could also carry water and food while traveling. So you would chase animals until they died of exhaustion, Nira said. Sometimes, but more often we would chase them until they were too tired to fight back effectively. Then we could use tools and teamwork to finish the hunt safely. Tools and teamwork, repeated Thorak thoughtfully. Humans are pack hunters, Jake continued. We work together, we plan ahead, and we never give up. Those traits helped us survive and spread across our entire planet. One of the spectators, a tall alien with blue skin, called out from the crowd. Human, if your species is so good at endurance, why didn't you warn them what they were getting into? Jake looked at the blue alien, then at his exhausted classmates. Would you have believed me if I had told you this would be difficult? The question hung in the air for a moment. No, Vex admitted quietly. We would have laughed at you. We did laugh at you, added Kex with shame in his voice. Sometimes, Jake said gently, experience teaches better than words. Dr. Helix finished scanning the last of the exhausted cadets and announced that everyone was medically stable but needed rest and nutrition. The crowd of spectators began to disperse, but many stopped to talk with Jake before leaving. Lisa Park, the human engineering cadet, pushed through the crowd to reach Jake. That was incredible, she said. Half the academy is talking about it already. I hope I didn't embarrass anyone too badly, Jake said, looking at his classmates who were slowly getting back on their feet. Are you kidding? Lisa laughed. You just changed how every alien in this academy thinks about humans. As the simulation chamber emptied, Jake helped his exhausted classmates make their way back to the dormitory. Chirex leaned on Jake's shoulder as they walked. Jake, Chirex said, I have a question. What's that? If humans are such good endurance hunters, and you never give up, what happens to your enemies in a real war? Jake thought about this carefully. Hopefully we never have to find out. But historically, human armies have been very good at outlasting their opponents. Outlasting them how? Long marches, extended campaigns, siege warfare that lasts for months or years. Humans can be very patient when we need to be. Chirex was quiet for a moment. I think I understand now why the Galactic Federation wanted humans in their military. Why? Because sometimes the best weapon isn't the strongest one. Sometimes it's the one that never stops working. That evening, Jake was studying in his room when there was a knock at his door. He opened it to find Vex, Thorak, Kex, and Nira standing in the hallway. We wanted to apologize, Vex said, his crystal structure now bright and clear again. We treated you badly because we didn't understand. You don't need to apologize, Jake said. You didn't know. But we should have asked instead of assuming, Thorak said. We judged your entire species based on one piece of information. We all do that sometimes, Jake replied. I made assumptions about you too. What assumptions? Nira asked. I assumed. You would quit when the hike got difficult, but you didn't. You all finished even when it was really hard. That takes a different kind of strength. Kex nodded slowly. Different kinds of strength for different situations. Exactly. Nira stepped forward. Jake, would you be willing to teach us some human training methods? Not the 12-mile hikes, she added quickly, but maybe some endurance exercises we could handle. I'd be happy to, Jake said. And maybe you could teach me some of your training methods too. I'd like to get stronger. Deal, said Thorak, extending his massive hand. Jake shook it, grinning, as Thorak was careful not to crush his smaller human hand. Over the following weeks, word of Jake's demonstration spread throughout the entire academy. The story grew with each telling, but the core message remained the same. Humans were not weak, just different. And different could be very dangerous in the right circumstances. The simulation chamber where the hike took place was eventually renamed the Morrison Trail in Jake's honor. New cadets were required to complete a modified version of the hike as part of their cross-species training program. Jake became something of a celebrity at the academy, but more importantly, he became a bridge between human and alien understanding. His willingness to share his knowledge, combined with his classmates' willingness to learn, created friendships that would last long after graduation. The lesson of the light hike became part of academy folklore. Never underestimate another species based on your own assumptions. In the vast galaxy, strength comes in many forms, and the species that survives is often not the strongest, but the most persistent. Jake's father would have been proud.